welcome back to our discussion of being an empath leader. Today we're going to take a look at where I think one of the best places to start is, and that's in being a leader of one. So what does this mean exactly? It means that before you can lead others, you have to be able to lead yourself in the simplest terms. But the problem is I know this is kind of a buzzy, kind of super sexy business concept that's going on right now. So let's dig in just a little bit deeper into what this entails and why you should want to add it to your repertoire. Let me give you an example. I really like martial arts movies. I like Bruce Lee. I like Jackie Chan. I like The Seven Samurai. I like The Drunken Master. And I do like the 1980s version of The Karate Kid. So let's dissect that story just a little bit. It's the hero's tale, right? So you got a dude, and in this case it is a dude. And he's kind of a loser, and all of a sudden he runs up against some obstacle, something he has to overcome. So in order to overcome this, he has to go through a series of trials and tribulations and obstacles. And he's probably got some kind of master teacher, but he has to be able to lead himself through all of these obstacles to come out at the end as the transformed hero. So what's the connection with the empath leader as a defender and warrior? Like we said, the hero had to lead himself. He had to be motivated. He had to overcome these trials. He had to keep going even when he didn't want to. He had to be a leader of one. That was the only way that he could be transformed into the hero. Now stop and think about it for a second. If we're in the real world and someone is faced with obstacles, and this includes me, you have an option. You can either put your head down, do the work, and do the best you can, or you can throw in the towel and say, I don't really want to do it. I don't really feel like doing everything that Mr. Miyagi says I should do, and I don't really want to do the work, so I quit. It'd be a pretty dull movie. It'd be a pretty short movie. And it wouldn't really be the kind of hero I would want. But you can choose not to lead yourself and just walk away. I would argue that as the empath leader, you want to take the more difficult path, and that means learning to lead yourself. This is where we can connect to the warrior leader, because before we can rise to the empath leader of love and compassion to many, we first must be able to lead ourselves with empathy, love, and compassion, or display that leadership of one. So where's the connection with empathy? It means the ability to self-reflect, to look inward and understand who you really are without flinching. An ability to look into inner darkness and experience the emotion without becoming a victim to it, which is a short definition of resiliency, which is another thing we'll come to later. A lot of us, probably most of us, suffer from shame, guilt, crippling anxiety, perfectionism, whatever. And what these dark emotions do is they shackle us inside, and we become a small version of ourselves. We're unable to show ourselves empathy or love or compassion because we're bound up. We can't look within. But if we can actually see what darkness is there, we can open these shackles up so that we can be open and be able to display empathy as leaders. It's kind of like looking down into a dark pit. As you're looking over the edge, you may not see the bottom, and it's really dark. But you take the leap anyway. You dig into those dark emotions and you learn how to lead yourself. So let's go back to our original definition of empathy. Empathy, as we've defined it, is when a person can relate to others on an emotional and not just a cognitive level. So we're not just relating with our brain where we go, yeah, I can see where that sucks. But you're rather relating with your heart where you can say, yeah, that sucks. I've been there and I can feel it. it's a much deeper emotion, but you have to be able to tease apart the emotions that are within you through self-leadership before you can connect to others on that same level. Brene Brown, author of The Gifts of Imperfection, says that the amount of love one can show to others is proportionate to the amount of love that one can show themselves. You cannot show others more love than you can show yourself, according to her studies. So to be an empath leader, it's imperative that you look inside and you lead yourself through compassion and love and empathy so that you can do the same for others. Interestingly, some traits that are categorized as self-love, like arrogance or selfishness, have nothing to do with self-love at all because they're not rooted in love. Rather, it's a way of hiding someone who feels really insecure and inadequate, although they probably would never admit that, and are afraid to show who they really are. Arrogance comes from the opposite of self-love. It comes from a place of fear. Now, I know there's a lot of people who would say that hate is the opposite of love. I would actually argue that fear is the opposite of love. But that's also a different video, so that this isn't 4 hours long. One can only show authentic love and compassion for others when they can show love and compassion for themselves. The point is that this makes a big circle starting with you. So how do you do that? There's 2 ways. The first is to actually experience it. I know you don't want to necessarily experience all the stuff that life has to offer, but sometimes it shows up on your doorstep anyway. And once you really understand what it is to be in the suck, you can relate to others that are also there. Let me give you an example. Before 2007, I cognitively understood what it was to lose somebody. But in 2007, I lost my mom. And when I was suddenly living in it, I really understood what it was. I really began to get a handle on the stages of grief, the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief. And for those of you who don't know, that's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Those are the 5 stages. The problem is it doesn't work out that neatly. Sometimes you circle back. Sometimes ones last longer than others. Sometimes you think you're almost at the end and then suddenly you're not. There are people that say there are other ways to look at grief. I kind of subscribe to this one. But once you've actually been in it and experienced it, you have a whole different understanding of how it works. I didn't even realize that 15 years later, I would still be trying to pick up the phone to call her. So what this means is that now when someone comes to me and says that they've lost someone or something very dear to them, I can relate on a visceral, emotional level. I feel it in my stomach. I empathically know exactly what they're going through. Think of it this way. In The Karate Kid, the problems he had to overcome weren't fluffy and they weren't easy, right? They were difficult, but it had to be difficult and put him under pressure to transform him into the hero. I mean, again, think about this movie. If his trials had been to go mow the lawn and don't have any ice cream after dinner, I don't see how that would make for a great hero story. And I'm not sure that's the kind of hero I would believe in. I may be the only one, but I don't know that that's a movie I would go see. Keep in mind that empathy is so desperately needed in the world right now, but it starts with this leadership, this self-leadership, and having the courage to look inward and say, yes, I can connect with these dark things to be a better leader. Or, yeah, I don't really feel I've honed that skill well enough. I need to be in better touch. Why is this important? Because in order to be an empathic leader, you have to be in touch with yourself, but it's also showing up quite a bit in the corporate world and in organizational leadership. Forbes said that for 2024, the big skill to have was EQ, emotional intelligence. Empathy is part of that, and one way to develop that is through self-reflection and understanding yourself. If these skills are so important as a leader, then we should really work to hone and cultivate them. And remember, the cultivation of this is a practice. It's not an action. It's not a one and done, and I'm never visiting it again. It's something you do every single day so that you can get better, so you can get stronger, so that you can learn to be that empathic leader. It's a lifelong practice. So, how do you become a leader of one? What are the paths and practices that one should attempt? I would say that the best way to go about this is to figure out what works for you. And there's a ton of ideas out there. Some of the more popular ones are to do things like meditate, do a lot of journaling, spend time with yourself so that you can really self-reflect and understand what's going on the inside. These are kind of on the personal level, and I'll admit for me, it works really well to do micro meditations. So what this means is I'll take 3 or 5 minutes throughout my day and just go, well, how was that? How did it go? How did I do? How did I feel? Where did I feel it? How can I do better next time? It doesn't have to be a big blown out practice. And I know people who meditate 30, 40 minutes every morning, and I appreciate that kind of stamina, but it doesn't work so well for me. I had to figure out what worked best. I don't do well with journaling. I've tried, but I can't stick with it, not for the long term. So that one doesn't work well for me, but it might work great for you. You should try it out and see. On a more broad level, some of the concepts that they suggest are things like eliminating chaos, both clutter in the environment and clutter in your mind as much as you can, by keeping a healthy body and mind, exercising, trying not to be too altered too much, trying to get away from the screen once in a while, and making time for yourself and understanding your own self-induced reality. And I understand that that can be really hard when you're super busy and you've got kids and you've got pets and you've got obligations and you've got all sorts of stuff going on. But even if you can just take 5 minutes out in your car in the garage and actually reflect, it can make a world of difference. For me, I've found that keeping my body healthy is really key to keeping my mind healthy. I try to clean the whole house. I can't clean one room and the rest of the house is destroyed. And by my house, I mean my mind and my body and my whole person. So again, you have to find what works best for you. But there's lots of ideas. The trick is to keep at it. Keep looking, keep listening, keep asking. See what works for you. Come back to things that didn't work for you before. They may work for you next time. And if you find this concept of self-love, self-compassion, self-empathy, and being able to self-reflect without feeling dark emotions, sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. It may feel a little odd at first, but it's worth it. You just have to be consistent and keep trying. Remember, practice, not action, right? It's a practice. For me personally, and I have been doing this for about 30 years, I just keep learning and listening and learning and listening. I always seem to find another path. I always seem to find another book, and I always seem to find something else that resonates with me that if I just try it, expands my leadership. So the biggest takeaway is to just not stop. Keep trying, keep looking, and keep practicing. And understand that sometimes you'll get these big revelations, but more often it kind of comes in tiny voices when you're quiet. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, that's what's going on. Like I all of a sudden realized that I'll feel different emotions in my body. If I'm feeling shame, which can trigger me to be angry, I'll feel it in my stomach. If I'm stressed, I feel it in my shoulders. I'm sure a lot of people do. Some things I'll feel in the back of my neck. So there's different ways to approach this understanding of yourself, but you just can't stop trying. There's lots of different paths out there, and the right one is waiting for you. You just have to find it. What you're really doing is digging deep into your own humanity. And as we said in our last video, your humanity is your greatest weapon as an empath leader. If you're also called to be that kind of leader, you'll need to sharpen that weapon, and that means really learning who you are. In about 470 BCE, the Greek philosopher Socrates said, "The greatest wisdom is to know thyself." We've all heard that quote, but sometimes we don't realize that there's more to it. The greatest wisdom is to know thyself. For those of us that are called to be empathetic defenders, hold fast to your humanity and remember that it's your best weapon for defending your people. As Donald McGannon said, leadership is an action, not a position. So start by taking the action to lead yourself so you can be ready to take action to lead others with empathy.